Can you shoot fast? It's even better if you shoot it fast. I'm Sam Bompas. I'm one of the co-founders of Bompas Parr, and sometimes it's hard to explain what we do. We've been called many things in the past, so everything from culinary jellymongers, food mavericks, culinary deviants, Willy Wonka's bastard teenage sons. But we like to call ourselves experience designers, and that kind of encapsulates everything. But really, what we're always aiming to do is try and give people extraordinary tales to tell around the dinner table, where they've become part of a gustatory journey unlike any that they've been on before. So that could be anything from cooking with lava to hosting a flavour fireworks show with 250,000 people all having the taste of the explosions as they explode in the sky above them. So you have red fireworks and it tastes like strawberries, or you have sort of orange ones, and then at the same time there'll be these Seville orange bubbles floating in front of this vast crowd, a crowd that's 3 times the live audience of the Super Bowl, and then going on to things like peach snow and edible banana confetti. But mainly with all of that, it's just trying to give people, I guess, a magical moment. Okay, so this is the lobby area. Here you've got loads of old jelly molds that we've made, various bits and pieces sort of end up here. This is the face of one of our interns. She was bitten by a snake. That wasn't that good. Yeah, so follow me through. I can talk about some of the bits and pieces. This is something we're prototyping. Always wanted to make a bouge chandelier. So this whole thing, actually it's not going to be ribbons and bows, it's going to be ratchet straps. And the whole thing will be inverted, dangling above the audience. And you'll be able to jump up on steps and like pour yourself a drink through that. So Harry and I met over 20 years ago when we were at school with schoolboys. We first met in the second orchestra, which really was for an orchestra for people who weren't terribly good at musical instruments at all. But it meant that their parents could feel good about what their children were doing, so they managed to make an orchestra. And we were both on sort of the back desk of it. I played the violin, Harry played the cello. I think we both spent most of our time making sure that our bows were going in the same directions as the leads of our various desks in the orchestra, so we looked like we knew what we were doing. But gradually, we found out that we had a lot of similar interests, in music, so we spent a lot of time on music, and also food as well. And gradually the interest in music sort of slowly waned, although we still go out a lot together. And food came on stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think actually while I was at Eton, I set up the first dining society that Eton had. But I think that was mainly as an excuse to meet girls, because you obviously had to have a mixed group of people at the table, and I hadn't really met many girls at the time. But as we left, Harry and I would always meet up and try and eat in the best restaurants we could and try and learn from it. And after a while, we thought, wouldn't it be much more fun rather than consuming to actually just go and make something ourselves? And I think Harry and I, so back in 2007, we sat down, we knew we wanted to do something with food where we're creating, actually getting to make something you could point at and be like, that's what I've done this afternoon. And went for a wander around Borough Market, and it was by far and away the best food market at the time. And I think it is again. It's really good. And we noticed that they had like really great meats and sort of like quite feral foods. You could have like a hearty meal there. You could also get great produce. What you couldn't get was a delightful summery dessert. And so we thought, for the summer of 2007, let's make jelly. And we thought jelly held the key to all the challenges. And very, very quickly put together a website, bank accounts, graphic packages. We knew what the company looked like, we knew what we wanted to do with jellies. And sadly, Borough just weren't interested at all. They couldn't see the vision of jelly that we had. but we very quickly moved from there to actually being able to make our own jellies in any shape and any size, and that's because we wanted to use those beautiful antique copper molds that you've probably seen in museums on people's walls as something that's very fancy and you don't touch. We couldn't afford them, and at the time Harry was training to be an architect, and he discovered that he could use those self-same techniques that he had been learning to design buildings to design jellies. So I think one of the very first jelly molds we designed was of St. Paul's Cathedral. Harry was really chuffed with it. He was thinking, this is an amazing design. I had to point out that Sir Christopher Wren might have been involved somehow, but so we then knew how to make these jellies in sort of various different shapes and sizes. And we thought, if we can do that, let's try and test our art, test our craft. And this is coming up for the London Festival of Architecture. So we said we're going to host we challenged any architects to design jellies. And this is in 2008. And so the economy was slowing down. I think College of Architects had a bit more time on their hands, and they were delighted by the idea of their buildings as jellies. So bizarrely, just for this architectural design competition about something as absurd as jelly, we had over 1,000 people enter, and we had the likes of Norman Foster, Roger Sturt Carver and Partners, Sir Nicholas Grimshaw, Will Alsop, all designing, projecting their own enormous creativity into this wobbly realm, the medium of jelly. And because we had such brilliant entries, we thought it would be really good to host an event. And I should say at the time we were using this to generate revenue for an architectural relief charity, Article 25. But we had such brilliant jellies, we thought we'd have an event, and we put tickets on sale, and we sold 2,000 tickets, which was really rather worrying because we had not done that many events at this time. And 2,000 people is an awful lot. And I think we set ourselves a budget of £2,000. It's a pound a person, which if you do events is not a great deal, as we've now found out. But we ran into a problem rather early on. So we promised architectural jelly banquets. Now the jellies we were making at the time were using architectural techniques on a food scale. So it's about this big, it's about the biggest jelly you'd want to eat really, because otherwise you've got to put so much gelatin in it just tastes meaty. Now the problem is that everyone hearing about this architectural jelly and seeing our amazing trick photography thought we're going to have these vast jellies that they're going to eat their way through, this total monuments made out of food. And of course, this wasn't going to be possible at all. And so this is when we started learning how to use all of the senses, how to use the sense of story to give people a really compelling experience. And this is when we started much more formally collaborating with different disciplines, whether they be artistic or scientific. So here we thought, okay, we're going to need a soundtrack. What do we do? And we found a scientist at UCL who is an inner ear scientist, and he was really interesting because he was like, well, the ear is mainly made up of collagen, and collagen is very similar to gelatin, like the root form, the magic ingredient in jelly. And so we worked with him to record the sound of jelly wobbling and transpose those frequencies, the frequency of the wobble, into sound waves. It actually sounded totally disgusting, not unlike masturbation. But new scientists picked it up. It was their most watched video of all time, although many people questioned the scientific merit of this sort of wobbling St. Paul's Cathedral with this uncanny sound next to it. It's one thing that, like having lectured all over the world, it's one thing that I found translates quite easily into any language, is the sound of jelly wobbling. When we started out, the kitchens were just in my front room, my house. So we had all these industrial fridges were in my front room. We had really sticky floors. I lived with my sister at the time. She's a barrister. She's really serious. She'd come in and after a hard day at her chambers, and there'd be just all these fridges buzzing away. There'd be jelly making everywhere. There'd be a bunch of me and Harry, and then all the crew. So it's nice that we've now moved out. So it started off as this quite a serious exhibition of all these architects' work, which we'd realised in jelly form. And then it turned out into this all-out food fight. There was jelly wrestling. It was complete mayhem. The chef, Heston Blumenthal, turned up, and I managed to persuade him to be our judge for the architectural jelly banquet and to be the person to anoint who is the ultimate jelly architect. And he was just totally upstaged as 5 people dived in simultaneously into this big jelly wrestling pit. We don't tend to worry too much about disciplines. What we're really interested in doing is burrowing into loads of disciplines and putting them all together to create this sort of monster that is totally new. So Harry and I both have quite different approaches. I love stories. I just read voraciously, just read in every discipline, trying to find out about how do people's lives turn out when they live them? Like, what are some interesting things that are happening now in terms of chemistry? What are the borders, the edges of science? But what's important right now in terms of like artistic disciplines and also technology? Harry, by turns, is much more sort of process driven. And when we identify an area that's interesting, he will then teach himself how to be an expert in that area, like very, very deeply. So I'm more generalist, he's much more specific. But then the other thing we do is try and just meet lots of interesting people. So whenever we're reading the paper and we see someone's work that we just really like, just don't hesitate and just blitz them with emails and phone calls and say, look, I really love your work. Let's meet up. Got no idea what's going to happen. And then hopefully it goes somewhere. And so the one thing I'm able to spend money on is books, and spend quite a lot of it on books. But I'm really into sort of coming in. This is a really good culinary library here. But then it goes into all sorts of other different disciplines as well. So you see the shelf marks here, sort of like everything from mysticism, biographies, architecture, the senses, lust, the occult, natural sciences, chemistry, magical plants. And it's when all these disciplines crash together and collide that you're able to get something quite new and different. So on the large scale events, say for like 50,000 people, quite often there'll be something like a theatrical production or an exhibition where you have smaller groups of people but coming through very regularly, and slowly those numbers build up. So it could be, we did something called Dinner at the Twits, where we worked with the Roald Dahl estate and theatre company to give you dinner with 2 of Dahl's most gruesome characters. And it was obviously quite tricky giving people a delicious meal but making it look utterly horrible and like creepy and awkward. And one of the dishes we did for that was actually a beer that we fermented by going and rummaging around down the back of Roald Dahl's writing chair and then using the wild yeast and detritus that we'd found down there to ferment an actual ale, which was kind of by turns disgusting but also awesome as well. And for me, was definitely one of the best creative days I had all last year, when just came up with this idea. And then I happened to be doing a kids workshop 2 years before with the Roald Dahl Museum, called them up, called out the Dahl estate who were working with, and I think they were all expecting someone else to say no to this idea, but everyone was like, yeah, it's fine by me, if everyone else goes along with it. And then suddenly everyone said it was fine by them. So we're in there in forensic suits in the very shed where Roald Dahl himself wrote all his books, swabbing away and then sending it all to our lab to see if we can find something in there that was good to turn into a beer. This is a rotavat. It's a pretty sciencey device. This means that you can distill meteorites to make spirits from outer space. So at the Twits dinner, we obviously had to have the bird's pie, but then we had all sorts of other gruesome interventions, everything from these sort of writhing worms. So there's this wormy spaghetti that actually moved in front of you through sort of motorized mechanisms. Lots of glow-in-the-dark, disgusting, snotty soups. Incredible, lots of sort of birds' legs and things with claws on and faces on. So they look quite alarming and out of the ordinary from the everyday. And then a stimulant Techron trifle at the end to just give people a bit of zap as they went out off into the night. So we're gearing up. We're doing a couple of charity events over the weekend where we're running some bars for them. So gearing up with a lot of the stock for that. But you can see actually if you come inside, and it's a pretty basic kitchen. So one of the things that we did was actually, and this is the first Dahl-esque thing that we did years before actually working officially with the Dahl estate, was making a chewing gum that changed flavour. And this was just because we discovered this. I was fascinated by chewing gum because it's of food, but it's also completely alien. So gum base, the central component, is technically called non-nutritive, non-digestible masticatory product, and it's plastic. So it's so weird that this is something that a lot of people have around them. They've got in their purse, they've got in their desk, but it's very low status as well. So it's kind of gross. Like, people frown on other people chewing gum, but at the same time, it's this incredible vector for flavour, because with chewing gum, unlike other forms of food, you can make it any flavour. It's just it's whatever flavourings you put in it. We've been doing a lot of work taking the genetic material out of fireflies and jellyfish that makes them glow, chopping them into simple bacterial cells, and then using those bacterial cells as mini factories to create the same enzymes that make fireflies glow, but then they're edible, and then you can put them in a lollipop or a sauce for your dessert. So you turn all the lights off and you get this spectacular moment of awe and wonder that's, you're not only looking at your dessert that's glowing on the plate, but also it's using the sort of genetic material that creates this sort of wonder of nature when you're swimming in the ocean, and it all sort of starts progressing around you. Sometimes we'll work with a lot of brands, and I guess our take on brands is maybe a little bit different. We kind of almost see brands as like the patrons of the modern era. So everyone forgets about the financing structures in Renaissance art. So in the Renaissance, your Michelangelos, your Donatellos were all funded by the Medicis, who were the merchant bankers of the day. They're not unlike, and all of that work going into art was really just their marketing budgets. So if you're on the back of a fresco with your face, being the patron, maybe one of the wise men, if it's a nativity scene, then you're telling everyone you've got a wonderful product because you're able to afford this, and that's not far different from really what a lot of brands are doing with their marketing strategies. So we see them as brands as being able to enable these incredible cultural moments. I don't know if the stuff we do yet will be seen quite on the level of Renaissance artists, but at least we've got something to aspire to.